Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. Now, as if you've been paying close attention, we did have a crash, and at the end of the last episode, and it was me sort of zooming in and out, and it trying to do things, and I just think it's delicate, and it overwhelmed the system. So I replayed things a bit, didn't make a few mistakes that I made before as it sort of worked. Is this guy any good at urban attack or fort attack? 20? Nah, not so good. That's a bad thing. 25, not so much. We'll head him over here though. And you guys can come up and alright. So, and want to thank Jeff. Very good suggestions, something I don't think about a lot. Long-time viewer. Hi Jeff, if you're watching. Suggested bringing in some ships for shore bombardment. Now, I just normally don't even think of this. Obviously, it is a thing. And I know you can also do it in Hearts of Iron 4 as well. You need to park. You know, when you move like, again, god-awful big sea zones I don't like, but you move, if you have your ships out patrolling or doing any of the four basic operations in the sea zone, it doesn't do it. But if you park in Hearts of Iron 4, the ships right off the coast, you will get shore bombardment bonuses, and I think they're cumulative, so this is really small for the Blücher and Bismarck with its fairly big guns. Let's see, for bombardment 12. What does Scharnhorst have? Shore bombardment. I'm probably scrolling past it too fast. Yeah, here 10, and we can switch over to the old, what they're calling coastal battleships, but pre-dreadnought battleships. Shore bombardment 8. So that will all help our assaults on Leningrad, at least. Obviously, Moscow's a bit too far into shore bombardment. That's why we have the big railway guns, because that does the same basic effect. Oh, one thing I was... Okay, yeah, you stop. Evade, 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 evade. Don't let them find you. Okay, yes, we control. Okay, so things are a little different than the last left. Needed to replay. But what did I just thought of? I just thought of something. Oh, it's right. Oh, yeah. I'm importing too much stuff, I think, is why this is sort of happening. It thinks it's going to get some of this money, but it's not, is what I think is going on here. So, let's kill the rare materials. Deals. That's what this is. So, we have a fair amount of it there. Not a huge amount though, as I'm looking at, but still a fair amount of it. I'm a little surprised with all of our crude oil. Fuel. Stop that. So Hopefully that will help this situation some. I think is what's going on. Break, so here. Cover a little bit. Yeah. I deployed a total of 4 more, 2 in this group and 2 feeding this airbase. 2 from Berlin and 2 here to bring more supplies in. So now rebase air supply. Moscow, flying in the supplies. Motorized HQs have advanced, very good. I think those sort of happened before. Yeah. Right about now that we had the crash, I think. Oh good, we're taking this out. Now that these guys together counterattack. You cut them off. Okay. Few have asked why am I keeping pushing here with this. There's multiple reasons. I guess I can almost always say that, but one of them is somewhere along here is sort of the line of bitter peace, or whatever you want to call it, and that's good. But at least in my previous experience, if you've captured a few more areas, you get to keep them, and I wouldn't mind having some more of the particularly resources. So you're swinging up that way. You can come down this way. But there's also a sort of a military operational reason. You can see out here our intelligence is sort of spotting some units moving around, and not that, I mean, they would overrun Iran right now, I think, if we were to bring them into the war at this moment. Not that I really think, because we cleaned up a bunch of the guards units that were right here. There's one still fleeing that way. Let's see, that's heavy tanks, mechanized forces, medium rocket artillery. It's pretty good. Guards, much more than these conscript units that we're fighting. But I do believe that if we were to, shall we say, slow down, we might start seeing pushback, and we've got a lot more provinces than we have units out here. I'm gonna go there. Now, let's push down this way. We could use the rare materials. Not that the coal will do us much good, but it's nice to get the helium. I think we already had one source. Once you have a source for something like these, and I know most of you know this, but we do have people that are fairly new. Once you have one of these up along here, you don't get any additional benefit for getting more of them. The only benefit you do sort of have is that they can be damaged. That's why you see 100% of each one of those. And, you know, by strategic bombing or combat on them or something, they would repair eventually. But if for some reason Japan were to lose its aluminum building in Pixian, we could supply them aluminum theoretically because we are close enough aligned to them and similar. So we're getting benefit from Japan's now. Tungsten, well, the two, we don't actually own any one of them. Our closest, well, dominant, I guess, is a puppet of Sweden, but also Spain, Portugal is closely aligned enough with us to get the benefit, and of course Japan. So for Japan, holding some of these really sort of helps out. Okay, so we're gonna get there. Japan having gold, that's helping us. And you can see ball bearings, Schweinfurt. Some of these, of course, we've had for some time. But a Kobe, I think is one of these in the east here. We just recently got. Because I was looking the other day, I thought it was here, right here. So if we, I don't know if that's in the bitter piece or not, but having that chromite. Chromium is a obviously, you know, it's chrome like you put on a bumper of an older style car. I know modern cars are plastic bumpers, are coated, but it's also really, really good for war industries. You chrome-lined barrels are really good. It's sort of very hard and helps reduce wear, and it also particularly protects it from fouling. Depending, it's, you know, the British, I think, are using, I know they were using in World War I. I think they're still using in World War II the cordite in the bullets. It's little sort of stringy explosives that they're putting in instead of a powder like a gunpowder or black powder you might think of. But the British use cordite in their, like, 303 British, and I don't know how corrosive it is. Most of the modern ammunition that you buy over the counter in the U.S. is non-corrosive ammunition. Most of the powders used in the ammunition are non-corrosive, but some of the primers have a corrosive element that if that gets into the bore, it will corrode it. I know World War II ammunition was very corrosive for the Americans, for the British. Very corrosive. So if you have a chrome-lined bore, it helps reduce your corrosion in there. It won't necessarily stop it, but it will help it. So, and I'm sure there's other production efficiencies too. Military academies, we're capturing more and more of those. Synthetic factories, we have Braunschweig, which helps with our stuff, and National Monument. That's just Pacific momentum, an idea that they mild use, just the idea that the AI is hopefully going to try to control as many of those as they can. So to give them both sides, the Americans and the Japanese, will hopefully find on them air bases and industrial zones. So yeah, just so that's some of the reasons we are pushing further east. And, you know, sure, you know, if this is just one factory, won't help so much, but the coal mine, yeah, we don't really need that, but still. I want a weak Soviet Union facing us. Don't know if we're ever going to do a second operation against them. Okay, okay, we'll send you guys in. You. Oh, good, they run out of supplies. Oops, if they run out of supplies, that's attacking here. We should also collapse. Good. Oh, you're bad. Okay, we'll stop that. We'll let these guys cross the river and close it down. built up a bit more money. Good. I really wish I didn't have to babysit this. The units, once they start to get too badly gutted, they just either fully withdraw from battle or move into the reserve. Better. But we need to take right there. Oh, okay. They took out a midget submarine that the Soviets tried, I guess, out of Leningrad. African Army recruitment, let's end that, and commando training, research. Oh, now let's start back a little bit of this. They're moving there, they're going that way. They're going across as well, so, across there. You guys come here. Alright, you guys can go that way. Maybe we should be a bit faster, so. You can collect some of the Caspian coast. Not that it'll do us much good. Oh, there's the battle. Yeah, still, these guys are stuck in this destroyed province. They're almost out. They should move much faster once they get out of there. Coming down to help us with the Leningrad operation here. Stuff. We're making a little bit of a dent. Oh, probably had a lot more units when we started. Thought I put you guys on. So let's stop your attacks. Hopefully you've done some good, but right there. I could not have done this without air supply. Well, let's come down here. I know we're still I don't know if you've noticed, but and I was advised by some of you, oh hey, you know, the Italians, they're doing this fine down here. Yeah. They're doing just fine. These guys are going to die. Don't know why they left all that retreat space in there. But. Okay, now. Let's send this stack division down here. You. And you. And you. Oh, just do support. You got one just. There's a support, so I don't want you moving there. You support Fonthoma. Have your conf group A there. Let's see there. Pretty harsh fighting there in the jungle. And it looks like we're going to put a note on that, but we'll take that out to try to control all that. And then just sort of cut them off, maybe. Actually, probably once we get this battle. Once we get this battle, we cut them off of any supply potential, so they'll, you know, die eventually. Oh, we're not moving forward. Would be helpful if we had a clock running, yes. Even I know that's helpful. Okay. You attack up there. You attack across the river there. And you come up that way. You keep going. Into there. Give them money. No, 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 no. We're building our money up. I'm trying to get as much crude oil as we can. Haven't got this one yet. Okay. A little bit helps. That would just be 2. So we secured that place. A little more. You don't need to go up there then. So you attack here. Yeah, good. At least we're going up day by day now. Mountain troops with, well, those are mostly cavalry. You got a little mountain artillery. It should be mountain troops. Oh well, no, it's Prince Eugen. Yeah, that's specialty mountain unit. Yeah. Winter Reinhardt? I don't know for sure. Okay, let's see. We're getting down there. I want to pull the 28 Panzer Division. No, we don't even have a leader for that one anymore. That will probably be an event. Let's find some sort of useful leader. We could grind up a level 2 or 3 here. No, not Stumpf. Use Luftwaffe. Luftwaffe is fine, it's just these 4 of the Hermann gun. We'll do a Fortress Buster. That's where you're going to be attacking next. Guderian, you go back into the fray. You guys go back in. Did I send that back up towards Leningrad? I know you don't know what I'm talking about. Yes, I did. I sent one of those. Oh, there it is. Right under there. Good. Get some more of these guys in pounding. Romania, money for oil. No, we're not doing well enough yet. No, thank you. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And let's get you into here. We're building more oil wells, which will get us more oil from here. Obviously, we're cutting down a lot by the military government, but there's also a lot of bonus elements. Back down to Africa. How are we doing here? We're running out of fuel again. Do we still have any transports here? Yes. Fuel for supply. These guys drop fuel on. Actually, no, don't drop it on them. It'll probably blow up. But land it there. Take it off. Land it there. You're slow, but you should have a lot of supply capacity. Battle for money, sure. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, well, got back down this way. You come out this way. Keep going to there. Take that one. I know you haven't really moved yet, not for another hour, but still. Logistical bombing me. Okay, well. They blow up their own country. Yes. Up a little bit of territory. Okay, if any of you don't already think it, and I do, man, I talk to them at the Black Ice Panzer Ruin crew, but sometimes, and I think this may be more, not Panzer, sorry, oh my god now, but including Panzer Ruin of the past, don't think that this is over effing set up here with these guys at the fort levels here for Leningrad and Moscow. You've got to be kidding me. Because I totally get the idea that you don't want an empty city that, and this may not be the perfect fortress busting division that, oh my god, could design, and he's one of the better guys at doing that. Okay, Grenadier unit. I know how to sort of cheat to have this collapse real quickly, but I prefer not to do it, and I may just end up doing it out of frustration. And very much to the point, I know I've done some personal modifications, but I'm trying to play the game that you guys play, and not either my personal tweak or, obviously, like I say, I've done a little of that, but try not to do it in a major way. Oh, there it is. You know, so this division, it has assault guns, fort attack plus 60%, urban attack plus 26%, plus it's already basic, you know, soft attack and hard attack. We had mechanized, you know, lots of soft attack, some hard attack, and fort 45, urban attack 10. You know, so okay, this may not be, because this has just standard artillery, and well, it has motorized engineers. So let's see, fort plus 145, urban attack plus 90. So I totally get and agree with the idea that you just don't want Moscow sitting there completely open. And you could even see if you were going to have Soviet diehards trying to hold it. I don't know that they would have, because if once they start seeing, you know, the NKVD and other sort of state apparatus people getting on trains leaving town, splitting out east, which is something that didn't happen in Berlin when the Soviets come knocking. Realize Hitler's in his bunker. Of course, in the very last days, you have the people fleeing the Führer bunker and whatever. But you didn't have the great bulk of the government. Oh, we're moving somewhere else, you know. There was talk of the sort of Bavarian Redout kind of thing. And yeah, that's fine if you think you're going to have somebody riding to the rescue. You know, if you're just trying to hold out for an extra 6 months because Japan's coming to relieve the siege on the Reich, yeah, okay, but it isn't a long-term strategy. By the time the Soviet Union's at war historically with Germany, you still got Britain. Pretty soon, if you're after December 7th, you know, again, we're talking historically, after December 7th, you've got America in the war. So yeah, if you go, hey, Moscow's threatened, you know, somewhere else we can set up government, and they're still going to try to supply us. I can see the government going, and then, you know, a lot of even sort of the diehard communist people that really want to die hard for the Soviet Union, they're still going to decide not for maybe Moscow. You know, if the government and everything else is splitting out of town, and you're seeing not just a couple of German reconnaissance battalions, you know, leading the way for the panzer divisions enter the edge of town, but if you're actually seeing, you know, a real assault coming, I can see a lot of the Soviet types, including, you know, loyalists even, splitting out of town. Very much so. I could see that happening. But if they were to try to fight, and I think that's also a legitimate thing, because maybe Stalin and a very small handful of people sort of kind of do the stay in town for a while, and as soon as it starts getting really sort of difficult, one night 10-20 people get on an airplane or two and fly east somewhere, leaving everybody else, you know, and I can see those people all going, yeah, we got to let Stalin out so he keeps the Soviet government alive, but we're gonna, you know, continue on fighting here. I can see that to be a hard-fought city, as we can see here. You know, they got the Kremlin and lots of buildings, and it could be sort of a Stalingrad-like, you know, bloody disaster battle situation. And yeah, but this, you know, so 2 or 3 panzer divisions barely make it to Moscow and are trying to bust their way in. I totally get that may be a bit hard. But this kind of thing? I'll let them get a little more prepared. Okay. So, what tech did we have come up? Okay, small caliber cannon and machine guns increased to level 5. Technology, that's why I didn't get lots of units. It's probably affecting, as you see, didn't get down. But that's, well, we may play past 45, and maybe in 44 we'll have the research to upgrade that again, but not for some time. And so if, you know, and right now I've been talking to Das G and Oh My God a bit about some of the discussions on the German economic situation. Das G pointed me to a nice article about that Germany was moving towards economic collapse before the war starts. The article is based on a book that I haven't read, and the author of the article presumably read. But in the article, they talk in some generalities, and and not hard cold facts, which are two different things. And I'm not even disputing any of their generalities, but they're saying that Germany was moving on to a period of collapse economically. And they talk about how the war and conquering all these different nations sort of helped saved it. How do I put this? I'm again not necessarily disagreeing with what they're saying, but there's something that's really important, and it sort of shows what I already knew about very significant elements of the Nazi economic plan, is okay, there's two economic situations. One, the domestic inside Germany, and two, international economics. Okay, those are two different things. Let's look for the moment just at domestic economics. And they're talking about some of the tax policies and progressive taxes, and that poor and middle-class people, they kept the taxes rather low, and it was on the rich. And they also talked about how sort of the Nazi ideology, particularly the rich who don't earn their money, in the sense of you know, earned interest on loans, or, you know, so if you are a lender to, but, you know, somebody goes, yeah, I want to, you know, borrow some money on my house, and, you know, to buy a car, or borrow money because I have a good job to buy a house. You know, people who sort of, shall we say, usury, which is a fine thing to do. It's, now, what isn't fine is to exploit the situation. One thing to get, and it can vary, because it also varies on rates of inflation. You know, if you're having a 30% rate of inflation, and we'll get to this in a second, and you're only charging 5% on the money for the loan, that isn't a good deal for the lender at all, because the lender's losing money at that rate, because his money's going away faster than the rate of inflation, or at least the value of his money. It would be better for him to go out and buy something like a house himself, or some other piece of property, because the money's becoming worth less as time goes on. So you need to pay. So if you have inflation rates that are, say, around 4% a year, and you have interest rates that are 6 or 7% a year, well, that means they're making 2 or 3% a year on their money, you know, in a real value sense of the way. So if you have a inflation rate, and this is why, if you're old like me, and I don't feel old really most of the time, but I remember the late 70s and early 80s, and when you could get 20% or something for your money in a bank account or a certificate of deposit. That's because inflation was up really high. You know, at 15 or 20%, you could get you know, money, you know, money back from various, you know, secured deposits that were paying interest, because inflation was high. Because if you were going to go buy a home, it was even greater rates of interest, just because of the inflation. Jump forward to the, I don't know, the 2000s or something, and it's like the government, especially sometimes, I think under late Bush and Obama, it's almost negative rates of, at least for the prime lending from banks to banks, loan. It's, you almost, you couldn't drop the interest rates anymore, because the government's pumping money into the system to encourage lending, so keeping the interest rates low. So it's, you can't, so what I'm saying is you can't put, oh, interest rates over X is greedy and bad. No, it's just, it depends on the inflation rate. So get back to the domestic German economy. Germany could afford, the government I'm talking about, could afford as much arms production as they wanted to afford. Now, I say that, and you may go, what? Yeah, no, they could. Now, and this article talks about, especially, the article sort of goes into 42 and 43, which is an artificial situation in the sense, because they're using that to justify those as being realistic, those big hits on okay, a bunch of people are trying to intercept these guys. Hits on spamming out ICs. I really do believe to hit, well, see, the Hearts of Iron 3 developers are reverse engineering what ICs values are. You know, they're trying to look at, oh, they made X number of planes, X number of tanks, X number of whatever, how many ICs do we need to make that? But there's growth in it, and I think because there's the mechanism to build it, I think to sort of hit general historical production levels, you need to build some. That's in the idea. But should you be building 5 ICs a year or 50 ICs a year? That's, you know, the kind of thing. And oh my God very much acknowledges that yes, the U.S. did have a GDP boom, a military production boom, and it carried it off very well, but only the U.S. did that. And he's absolutely right. Germany wasn't quite doing that. But they could buy as many tanks and buy as many Messerschmitt fighters as they wanted to. Germany could. So long as the factories could produce them, and the factories could, and they could pay the companies to produce more factories, to expand their production as much as they wanted to. Now, you have the practical sense is how fast, how much production can a factory have? Pre-war, early war, they were still doing one standard shift a week for production, in that somebody would, the guy would show up for, I don't know, an 8 or 10 hour shift or something like that, and work that shift and go home. Factory goes closed for the rest of the day. Kind of thing. That's what they were still doing, my understanding. Again, if somebody has some other good details, including somebody like Django, but about it. But that's my understanding. It isn't until 41, 42, and that we really start to see with the problems on the Soviet Union, with the idea of second shift in their producing, longer shifts, working on the weekends, really working the armaments industry to capacity. Now, if we're talking, 43, 44, we're talking the Speer armaments production boom, okay? And so, now that is all, but that's a bit later. So you can easily expand the amount of production, because so you can have a Messerschmitt engine factory and go, okay, you work, okay, you had been doing an 8-hour day, we're going to need to tune it up to 9 hours, of actual in the factory work a day, and we're putting on a second shift, so as time, you're going to be for a while training new workers, which is, so you're not going to be, you're actually going to reduce production a little bit, that extra hour or two, maybe working on the training, temporarily reduced production levels to get new workers producing, but that's, a month or 3, to get that kind of going. And then now you can have the factory open, if they're 2 9-hour shifts, 18 hours a day, so you can be producing more engines. Germany could be producing that in 1938 or something like that. Now, and again, and they talk about this, and in the article they reference it, how Goering was messing with the books. The only way you can do is 4-year plan and do the armaments production. I have to do this. Yes, you can do that as much as you want to as a system like Nazi Germany. The problem comes not in that there's deficit spending from the government, meaning the government doesn't have the money. Who cares? Just go, oh, you paid it all out? Oh, okay. Just, in essence, literally print it up, or figuratively in the sense that you just add money to the, to the books. The government has 100 million Reichsmarks. Oh, no, that's wrong. It's 20 or 200 million Reichsmarks in the bank. You just go in and make up the money in the accounting system. The problems that you get is, and we talked about this earlier, if you do a lot of this, is potentially, or likely at one level or another, inflation. And we can see what happens is what sort of brings Nazi Germany and the Nazis into power in Germany in the hyperinflationary periods. And so, if you go, oh, you owe Britain, a million Reichsmarks a month in, war debt. Okay, we'll just print up a bunch of these $1 million Reichsmark bills and just hand them out to them, and the money becomes worthless. That's sort of what happens with the economic system. Money becomes not worth less than before, but becomes almost worth less, worth nothing. And that's the problem with the government just printing up too much money. I know I've talked about this before, but it just sort of come up in some of the discussions. Now, if you're having a bunch of workers out there that are making good money making Mauser rifles. And I go, yeah, I'm making Mauser rifles, but I don't want to buy a Mauser rifle. Now, if I was making toasters, I'd want to buy a toaster. And the average, and they're not selling the Mauser rifles to the general German public, so you're not producing something that people want to spend the money on, you know, the general people. No one's out buying a Panzer tank. So you have all these people that now have money, and they want to go spend it somewhere. And so that's going to increase inflation, because if you only have, a billion pints of beer made a day in Germany, or whatever it is, and you now have workers that instead of being able to afford to buy 1 pint of beer, they can buy 3 pints of beer, but they're still a million pints of beer a day or whatever, is what was the normal previous German consumption is now you got saying, well, I'll pay you double for the pint of beer. And so the pint of beer goes up in cost, because if you don't have price controls, that's also something Germany could do. Why is this Siegfried? Probably because it was there. Let's send him to Moscow. Don't know if we're going to last that long for him to get there, but we'll send him to Moscow. Probably should have been sending him already, but fort attack 290% and urban attack 210%. So you can do this, but you have to have a way to claw the money back off the markets unless you're doing lots of consumer goods. And Germany was also doing lots of consumer goods, but they were also doing a lot of social welfare projects. I know a lot of you Europeans out there who believe that people have the right to government-paid health care. Fine. I don't think it's a right. I think it's a nice privilege, personally. And my problem is not that it's a bad privilege to give people, it's just that I think it dumbs down the quality of healthcare overall, and it's better to have it individually incentivized, you know, because whatnot. But they're doing a lot of other non-essential, shall we say, social welfare programs. We've seen it in the Seebadpora, wherever Seebadpora is up and along here. Resort, and I know we've talked about it and had events on it, and it still exists, a big mega resort. And in sort of the Bauhaus type mass architecture, trying to have a lot of German workers on the few nice sunny days on the Baltic kind of period holiday camp. Yeah, it looks great. And it was probably going to be a little more National Socialistic regimented in that, you know, but I think this appeals to Germans. Not everybody, so if one German, I don't like to be told what to do, I'm sure. But a lot of them like, oh, the program is now to do, you know, exercise in the morning, sunbathing in the afternoon, and in the evening we're doing, you know, having organized events. And, you know, there's lots of people all over the world that like that kind of thing, but I think Germans tend to it more. You know, you've also seen the Zapot events earlier with sort of mass exercising things. It's all voluntary, you know, but it's, you know, come for the, you know, the kind of thing. But sort of programs of doing stuff. And this was also something that was going on the Nazi cruises. They had a lot of programs for doing stuff. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, geared towards a political indoctrination element. It was just various health and various group activities. You're belonging to the group. And, you know, we used to have, I don't know if there's still Cub Scouts in America. We used to have the Boy Scouts. Now it's just some weird scout thing. But, you know, group activities are great, but you can talk about levels of regimentation on that. And so, you know, but I'm not trying to knock it. It's just my sort of biased on types of activities. But it really looks in concept like a great sort of, for the period, you know, just generally what's going on in the 30s. And that's everywhere in the world. Looks like a big, great seaside resort. And the government, in essence, through the DAF, and which is an element of the government, the Deutsches Arbeitersfront, German Workers' Front, is building this up. So this is part of the non-essentials social welfare programs that aren't necessarily bad things, because you notice I'm not knocking the idea of big sea resorts, but they're sort of non-essential. So Germany was doing all of that kind of stuff as well. And now if you put up this big thing, now the workers that may actually want to come, and if you charge them, nominal fees to use the, go on holidays there, that is something that then you can, over time, you build it, you staff it, which means more people getting, in both building and in staffing it, getting jobs. But then there's going to be lots of the people, armaments workers, go on holiday. And you get to make money back into the DAF's coffers to then do other programs. So you need ways to claw back the money, as it were, to keep inflation from going rampant. So it's a balancing system if you're going to do a managed, I didn't say command. Nazis only did command economies, like you see in the Soviet Union, in the sort of mid to late Speer era. Now that's, of course, not per Nazi ideology, that is per, oh shit, we're in the war with everybody else on the planet. Because by that time, Italy is collapsing and Japan is off doing its own thing. Everybody's at war with us now. Even Latin American nations that most Germans hardly ever heard of are now at war with Germany. And so, you've got to do a command economy. Germany, before that, and ideologically, there's the left Nazis and there's sort of the, I don't know if you want to right or centrist Nazis. There's different flavors within them, but the Nazis never really wanted to have a command economy, but they wanted to have a managed economy. So if you do it right for a considerable amount of time, you can manage the economy. And so I agree with Das G and Oh My God, that if all you do for, say, 4 years is spam out ICs, that's sort of like pre-building, but and because you can stack, because in essence, and this is the problem with Hearts of Iron 3. Again, we love this. I'm playing this with you. Let me just save the game here because we're talking too long. We love this game here, but this is part of the problem with Hearts of Iron 3 that Hearts of Iron 4 solves, in that rifle factories can build other rifle factories, and they can't in reality. Some of the machine tools could be used to make other machine tools, to make more rifles or whatever, but there's a practical limitation on it. So with the single-use ICs, you have over spam. So I agree with, but so even if you got rid of some of that and then just continue to expand your arms industry overly too much, I agree with them, you're going to have problems because you're not having that good ability to claw the money back into the system. One thing that if socialists were understood economies, they wouldn't be socialists. And that's very true in my opinion. I know high socialists out there. I know there's a few who watch. But economies aren't like land ownership. And Marx is, for all the sort of coming out of sort of newly, capitalism, because before it was mercantilism was sort of the main economic practices. But if you look at economies, and this is how I understand how Marx looks at economies, and I'm not a Marx expert, but how I understand is that he's looking at it like Hitler looks at land. There's only so much of it, and any that somebody else has is something that we don't have. So economies are not like that. It's not like, oh, that guy's getting paid 100 times what I'm getting paid. That doesn't mean that you're getting paid any less. And then if you got paid, they're not relation. Your boss's pay versus your pay is not relationable. They're not. His being paid more doesn't mean that if he didn't get paid more, you would be paid more, because you have other costs as well as an employee. They got to run insurance. They've got to pay government taxes on what they pay you. And there's all kinds of other elements to running a business that employees cost businesses to run. And so the left, the socialists, the whatever, they have a point, and especially looking back when Marx was writing, is when you have people working their fingers to the bone, almost literally, and that are nearly starving because what they're being paid is too little to feed themselves, and you're having child labor just to be able to feed themselves. They're going working in factories. Child labor in and of itself is not a bad thing, people. It's sort of social reforms in the Victorian era made it seem like a bad thing. It isn't, because we look for generations of humanity. Children worked with their parents. If their parent was a shoemaker, they probably were an apprentice shoemaker at a young age. If their parent was a farmer, more likely, because there were more farmers out there than professional shoemakers, they worked on the farm. It's once they are moving into, shall we say, god-awful factories and dangerous factories, and then you're using child labor there, that's when it becomes bad. So it's conditions. It's conditional that it's good or bad. So you notice I'm not trying to say, oh, you're 10 years old, you should be working every day in the factory. No, I'm not saying that. But the idea of child labor in and of itself is not bad. Just the conditions and the type and all kinds of other factors are coming into that element. But so if you're having the idea that somebody is making a super amount of money, and then there's others within your society, and if you look at this as a societal model, not sort of a libertarian individualist model within a country, but a society, an organic sort of society, if you have an ultra-rich group of people and you have a substantial, obviously, and I see we're getting more and more homeless here in California for various reasons. A bunch of them are drug addicted and have other mental problems, and I see them on the street. I feel really bad. But if tomorrow you say, oh, here's a job, they can't handle it. I mean, even sort of a basic sweep the floor, push the broom around, sort of make work job, they can't even handle that because they're drug addicted, because they have other mental problems, maybe because of that. And there's other, now, should they be taken care of by the state? I sort of kind of to some degree, but then of course we need to take care of all of the people that are coming into the border in flooding large amounts. Well, wait a minute, why do we need to take care of the rest of the world's poor? No one nation. And America gives more per capita as a government, per capita, than any other government on the planet to other nations' welfare. Oh, American citizens per capita, people, and I know I'm speaking to a overwhelmingly majority non-American viewership here. Per capita, Americans give more, individual Americans in donations give more to charity, particularly outside of their country charity, than any other nation out there. So Americans are giving to the rest of the world, but we can't take care of the rest of the world. And I don't think that the developed nations can take care of the rest of the world. But so greedy America is doing its best. But so on your own society, so if you have a destitute underclass and then you have an elite rich, that's a problem. But if you have a poor class that has a computer in the home, a TV, they're hooked up with an internet connection or a satellite or a cable connection of some sort, and they they may not have a car, but then a lot of Eastern American cities are not really designed around having cars. But if they're rural, they probably, even though they're poor, they have an automobile. Now, maybe an old clunker of an automobile, but they've got an automobile, and they're not too hot in winter, and they're not too cold in no, sorry, I'm getting that wrong. Not too cold in winter, not too hot in summer, and they're sort of like kind of okay, and they're having enough, maybe not very high quality food, but they're having enough food, and then it doesn't matter how rich your rich are, so long as the basic needs of the great majority of the people in your society are taken care of. It doesn't matter how rich the super rich are. It just doesn't. It is not a bad thing. So income inequality is a good thing. Whenever I hear people complain about, oh, income inequality problem, no, that's not a problem. That's a good one. Now, if you're talking about, and so notice in America, and I don't know about in Europe, or I know we have viewers there, and we have some viewers in Australia, and now India. Now there's lots of poor and destitute people. If ads is watching this, and I'm not blaming India, just there are poor and destitute people there. But in the developed world, we hear this income inequality problem that they talk about because they're no longer really a starvation problem or a too much of a homeless problem. Now I'm talking, we got many thousands, tens of thousands of homeless here in California, but there's various reasons for it, and the cities with the biggest homeless problems in America are all run by Democrats. Yeah, that's an issue. It's how the Democrats run things is part of the problem. But so, income inequality is good, not bad. Back to Germany. So, if you're designing your society and managing it well, you can handle your armaments production. But you can push it too far out, too far extreme in production, and that's a problem. Now with Hearts of Iron 4, again, and I'm a big fan of what they're trying to do, but obviously I still love this, and I still like this today better than that. But with the idea of civil ICs that build things, sometimes some of the things they build are really maybe more military ICs, but it's sort of hard to break it out. Meaning to say, if all of your buildings are being built by civil ICs, okay, and some of your buildings are anti-aircraft guns, which really should be military ICs, but your provincial base anti-aircraft guns, these suckers here. But if you are and so, because those are mostly the big expense is the anti-aircraft gun, which is also you building as a military thing, and that's sort of harder to do within the game. So some of the civil ICs, what they make, and what you might also have them make is an ammunition or supplies, but because supplies can sort of equal instead of military ICs, supplies could really turn over. And if we could ever get supplies back into Hearts of Iron 4, I would remove Black Ice's uniforms and some of those other things, because shoe factories become boot factories, dress manufacturers become uniform manufacturers. That's just a shift in some of your civils type support. But so then you can max out all of your civil ICs into building military ICs and not building other buildings. So you've sort of removed that problem, and you've divided out the shipbuilding from the rest of the armaments. The other thing I really sort of would, but I believe when they've said this, trying to create a third or fourth production ability is something you can't just easily do. I mean, not that they couldn't do it, they could, but not something that could be modded, shall we say. And that I would also sort of break out aircraft factories. I would do that, but that's just me. So Germany can do things within reason much more than I think the current Black Ice developers think. But now, to their credit, they're also saying with some of the stuff you can decide to have. They're reworking some of the limitations, they've said. And they've also stated that if you want to, they will have, a pop-up at the start. Do you want the historical limitations or not? Or whatever it's going to say, something like that. And you can do a yes or no. Now, also on Germany's economy, and this is where a lot of people talk about Germany's desperate need for money, German government. And they had this. Their problem was with international exchange. They had American debt. Now, most of the American debt was, war reparations, France, Britain, and Belgium, and whoever else wants money from Germany for invading them. And I don't blame people wanting, we just spent untold amounts of money fighting you guys. And now that you've lost, you get to pay us back for the cost of fighting you guys. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Might to you, but, doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I still think Germany owes the world a lot of money. I know there isn't necessary generational guilt for war crimes and wars of aggression, but I think Germany owes the world lots and lots of money. And Japan and Italy. And so I think they do. I don't know. Yeah, that's how I contributed to, and especially I think with the Marshall Plan helping rebuild Western Germany in such a way that the eastern part got sort of raped by the Soviet Union after World War II. So, how do you split that out? Or I don't know. But because I look at the war debt. So, but America, what they did is and I don't know if they got money back from Germany, but they loaned Germany lots of dollars or whatever to pay off their war debts to primarily France and Britain, and probably Belgium and other people too. But they did that. And then that was sort of going along fine until the American stock crashed. And that sort of collapsed that system. But Germany needed to import critical elements, including just steel, into Germany for both its general use and for its war buildup. That is the critical choking point for Germany's economic system leading up to World War II. They were in debt heavily to America. Again, that was primarily previous stuff, but they were continuing to try to borrow, I believe, from other nations to finance purchasing of things like steel and other resources. And to the point that been reading like Hans von Luck's memoirs and other things, that he's traveling outside of Germany, and as a reasonably well-off person, including being a very junior army officer type person, and living fairly well within Germany, he has to go traveling almost on like, not literally $1 a day, but it's, some super cheap amounts, and he's really trying to stay with friends and associates that live in other countries. Because Germany has the situation in which they don't want you to take the Reichsmarks out. They don't want you to go, I want to exchange 500 Reichsmarks for however many lira that was, because they don't have the extra lira to do that. They're using the lira to buy Italian copper or something or whatnot. And so any lira that they have, they want to buy stuff. So he can only take out, 50 Reichsmarks and get lira. So they're really controlling the exchange and the ability to move the money out of Germany. So that is something that is very real, and which to me is taken care of with the trade elements. And so, as you can see in the early part of the game for me, and we're still to the point doing it, is much exporting as much supplies or commercial goods as it would sort of be, out to other nations as I can, which does, in my opinion, simulate, because since those are the same ICs that I would be using to make more ICs, is sort of covering that international trade balance situation. Because we have money in Hearts of Iron 3, there is a black ice for Hearts of Iron 4 ability moving back to money, and there may be, even in the standard game someday, a money or a medium of exchange again. They didn't want to say you buy a Panzer IV from the factory for $100 or whatever the money would be. They didn't want money to be used that way, but I think they've sort of learned their lesson from some of their mistakes with trying to do what they're currently doing for trade. But that a means of exchange, the idea that you may be buying something from France but selling something different to Britain, and do that as opposed to just, you know, doing one-way trades. You know, you're doing a selling over here, buying here, and that kind of thing. Because in a way, for resources and other things, I don't know, Britain may want consumer goods, but France doesn't. But France has steel to sell or something like that, you know, and so you have that. But with the multiple buildings, you're getting some of this done. So that's sort of my thoughts on the German economic situation. You can manage those things. Germany was coming close to having a problem, but they never actually did, and I'm pretty sure that they could have expanded production a lot more. Now, some of that production expansion are here and here, in that full civilian economy, basic mobilization, especially when you're getting to full mobilization, war economy, and total mobilization, is the idea of simply taking the same number of ICs or factories and adding more shifts. So I like, you know, some of that is held within that. So thanks for watching. I really just appreciate it if you made it this far. Thanks for liking the videos. It also, the 10 or 20 of you that do make it this far, I really like if you hit that, because it helps YouTube visibility things. If you haven't already, of course, probably by now, if you made it this far into the video, you have subscribed, but if you haven't, please do. And of course, I really love hearing from you, and so comments on any of this, of what I've been saying, if you think I'm wrong, why you think I'm wrong, and if you got, now I noticed I'm not able to post links and comments, so and so even I can't do that, and so I don't know what YouTube's trying to do, or I can't post any, paste, I should say, paste any text into comments. So that's sort of a pain for me. But you know, I do, if you have good articles or good things about some of these topics, I would love to see them. Thanks so much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.